Okay, I apologize for my hair, it's not working today. Hi friends, hello, hi, it's me, it's Ali, and I am back in my chair in front of this bookshelf to talk about my favourite books of 2022. I had to think. It's technically 10 books, and you'll understand when I go through them. But I struggled a lot actually with doing this list because I read incredible books last year. I think my last video I talked about I had I read like 47 5-star reads or something along those lines. I had a lot of 5-star reads this year, which is really freaking awesome, purely because I think this year last year I should say, I've tried harder, I guess, to read books that I think would fit my likes, because life's too short to read shitty books. So these are in no order. I have not ranked them because I think that's just too hard for me to do. So I'm just going to go through them the order that I have them stacked right next to me. And a lot of these books I will have spoken about before. If not here, well, definitely on my blog. If I have any corresponding blog posts where I talk a bit more about these books, I will leave them linked down below. Let's just get started. Let's start. Okay, the first one is one that I've already mentioned in, I think, both of my videos that I've uploaded at least once. It's The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan, book 3 in the Wheel of Time series. So I love this series. I'm on book 4. I've actually started reading it. I adore this series, and this is my favorite at the moment, purely because the character building that we have in this book, the character development, the introspection that we have on these characters, like Perrin, Matt, like it's just incredible, and I couldn't stop reading it. Robert Jordan has had the most mesmerizing writing in fantasy. I'm sorry, is that controversial? Because it's true. Like he was that bitch. He's absolutely incredible. You read these books and you are just immersed in this world that he created, and I think I have said before, you know why he is such a core fundamental element of like what fantasy is now as a genre. I love The Dragon Reborn. And also the scene with Matt with his what was it called? It's like not a sword. Like, there is a scene where Matt owns supposedly the best like swordsman at Tarvalon who are training to be wardens. It's fantastic. I love this book so much. I also have a dedicated blog post because on my blog I have a series that I'm still continuing where I essentially like track my reading experience reading these books. Love it. Next book is another fantasy actually, and this is book 2 in high fantasy military series, and that is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. I read this in Italy. I reread The Poppy War, I then read The Dragon Republic, and then finally read The Burning God. The Dragon Republic still remains my favorite in this series. I think this had everything. This had, what did it have, Alex? It had action. It had the aftermath of what we see in the first book. We also see a lot of things happened, and it really forwarded the plot. But not only that, you could kind of understand where Wynn as a character was going, and you learn to you love her, but you also think, what the fuck are you doing? She is such a unique character in fantasy, and she will always have a really big place in my heart. But I definitely think out of the entire series, The Dragon Republic is definitely the standout. And I think I read this within a week. Like instead of leaving my hotel room in Italy, in Rome, I stayed inside and read because I couldn't put it down. It was brilliant. R.F. Kuang's writing is on a different level. The way that she creates her narrative with such a authentic kind of weaving in of history, especially the influence of history with this entire series. It was just really well done. I love this series, and That's why I'm really excited to read Babel, even though I'm also slightly terrified. But The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang is a favourite book of 2022. The next one I've spoken about so many times. It's Middlemarch by George Eliot. I won't talk about it. I've spoken about it so many times. It was in my favourite classics of all time video, which was my first video on this channel. I love this book. Middlemarch by George Eliot. I read it in 2022. It changed my soul. It was amazing, incredible, iconic, legendary. We love her. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, go to that video. The next one was a surprise, and I really was tossing up whether or not to put this on my favorites list because it's a novella short story. It's Galatea by Madeline Miller. I think I pre-ordered this, but my pre-order, something happened, so I got it later than, I think the Australian release was later than everywhere else or something. It was like that because everyone was reading this and I was still waiting. But Galatea, I did not know the myth of Galatea. It's about a man who is a sculptor, I believe. Yeah, he's a skilled marble sculptor who is blessed by a goddess who has then brought to life one of his sculptures, like his most beautiful sculpture, because it's the most beautiful woman everyone's ever seen. And obviously this man expects Galatea to be his wife and like love him unconditionally for the rest of his life. Galatea is like, no. Galatea is, oh, I wish this was a full-length book. Galatea, her story, I actually didn't set out to annotate this book, but I did. She was such a strong narrative voice, excuse me. She knew what she wanted and she understood. It was really heartbreaking at times because she understood her purpose as a woman was to be owned by her husband, and also kind of a reflection on like the fact that he's rich. She literally has no like leg to stand on really, and the standards for men are like vastly different for the standards placed on women in not only in like ancient Greece but in modern contemporary society. But I read this and my reaction was just very intense, and I was reminded why I love Madeline Miller so much. It's her writing, it's her characters. She, for something that is a myth that's been around for, you know, thousands of years, she breathed kind of new life into it, like the goddess herself. But yeah, I just loved it. It was just fantastic, great commentary and exploration on the position of women and the oppression of women's voices and their experience. Highly recommend if you haven't read it. It also will not take you long at all, so please do. This was absolutely brilliant, and I keep on screaming about how wonderful this book is because it just is. I've only read 2 of Madeline Miller's books, and no, I haven't read The Song of Achilles. I will in the future, but I've read Circe and Galatea. Stunning. The next book is technically 2 books, but I'm putting it as one on my list. And it's book 1 and 2 in the Bright Falls series by Ashley Herring Blake. Delilah Green Doesn't Care and Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. So Delilah Green actually came out earlier this year, and I read it earlier this year. And then Astrid Parker came out a few months ago, and I read it a couple of weeks ago. I just love this series. I think I love the way that Ashley Herring Blake creates these really adorable romances, but they also deal with themes of like family and tumultuous sibling relationships and tumultuous parent relationships, and it talks about imposter syndrome and kind of the burden of responsibility, and I loved every second of reading these 2 books. I don't know which one's my favorite because Delilah Green Doesn't Care was fantastic. It's, if you don't know, it's about this woman in her late 20s, Delilah Green. She doesn't believe in dating. She's more of a one-night stand kind of gal. She goes back home because her stepsister is getting married and she's photographing the wedding, and she bumps into Claire, this woman who is Astrid's best friend, one of Astrid's best friend, and Astrid is Delilah's stepsister. And Delilah and Astrid have a very complicated relationship, but they end up falling in love, and then in the second book it's Astrid's romance. So I loved the character of Astrid so much. Even in Delilah Green, I think for me she really stood out because I really connected with her. And so I think on a character level, Astrid Parker, but in terms of the like romance, I think Delilah Green. I don't know actually. Maybe once I read the third book that comes out next year, I will figure it out. But it's happy ever after, and just a really adorable but also very spicy kind of romance. This one is, it is more like there is a the romance is a very main aspect of the story. Obviously it is a romance novel, but we do sit with Astrid for a bit and see how she develops and how her relationship with her mother develops, as well as even with Delilah. I had a few issues with Jordan, which is the romance lead in this book. She was a bit, not weird, but her ex-wife had cancer, and there was a few parts where Jordan would be like, because she's hurting obviously still after her ex-wife, asked for a divorce and said, I don't want to be with you. But the way that Jordan kind of speaks about it, it's as if, well, she does say like, I was there when you were sick and like holding your hair up when you were throwing up. I was, going around trying my hardest to find like human hair wigs for you, and you leave me? Like, it was just a very strange, it was just strange. And then there was this, wasn't really a conflict, but it kind of was, where Jordan got manipulated by her ex-wife into thinking that Astrid was manipulating her about a situation that Jordan herself orchestrated, like it was her idea. So make it make sense. But other than that, I did really love their relationship. Astrid figures out her sexuality, well, not figures out, but like realizes her sexuality in her late 20s, and that was really cool to see represented, not gonna lie, these two books, but it counts as one. Okay, don't judge me. We are a judgment-free zone here. We are friends. Don't judge me. Then the next one is one that I don't know if I, oh my god, the tower toppled. Anyway, so this next book is a weird one, and I'm not even gonna pretend and sit here and be like, oh my god, no, like, don't listen to everyone. Like, no, it's fucking weird, and I don't know if I would ever recommend it. But I would describe this next novel as feral and unhinged, but not unhinged in the sense of it being so strange and weird and unable to be defined. Does that make sense? Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder. I read this earlier last year. I saw it kind of making its rounds on YouTube, and I have to say that it was the title that just brought me in, but it was also the fact that it was blurbed by Carmen Maria Machado. So I knew that I was in for some sort of wild ride, and boy was I right. If you don't know what Nightbitch is about, we have an unnamed narrator, in that we don't get her name, but she refers to herself in the beginning as Mother, and then eventually into Nightbitch. She has had a son, and she is, doing the stay-at-home mum situation. She was an artist and doing quite well, but then she had her child, and all of a sudden she's the one staying home and her husband is the one going to work, and she's like, who am I now other than a mother? Like, it's talking about identity and motherhood, and in the beginning maybe even postpartum depression. I don't know if she ever comes out and says that's what she has, but it's got elements of that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, especially the reflections of motherhood and identity, because she and also like the violence of childbirth. This book really emphasized how traumatic childbirth is and why we don't speak about it in the ways that it actually exists for many women, and how motherhood, in like, you gain something, and by something it's like being a mother and having a child, but it also takes away so many things, and it kind of talks about this sacrificial type of relationship. And it was fascinating and brilliant, and I loved it so much. You almost have to sitting there like, how, like, when does it get weird? Babe. She then realizes that something's not quite right, and that she's legitimately transforming into a dog. Not a werewolf. This isn't a werewolf story. This is not a werewolf story. It's not that type of fantastical paranormal. No. She's turning into a domesticated dog. It's a dog. And she has no idea why. I think this is what I've read on like reviews and stuff, the transformation is into a dog is kind of like the transformation or the realization of motherhood and its collective nature of it, that women and people who give birth experience this thing that is very unique, and you are stripped down to like your primal urges of like protection and feeding your child and loving your child and taking care of your child, I think. But she is legitimately turning into a dog. And trigger warnings for animal abuse and like animal death. She is a dog and she kills a rabbit. It was a very strange scene. But it's still wonderful because it is also I don't know, I'm listening to myself and I sound ridiculous, but you know, Rachel Yoder, the author, kind of strips back the layers of civility and of like society, I don't know why I'm laughing, of societal expectations and pressure of like normative gender roles, but also of like normative ways of behavior, because Nightbitch does not behave as a woman, as a mother should, and that's a problem. That's a problem for everyone else except for her, because she finds so much freedom in shedding these layers of civility, in being who she feels like she is supposed to be at her core. I literally wrote so many quotes down because I loved this book so much. She, and by she I mean the character, but also the author, just so wonderfully encapsulates the experiences and journey of the mother with her first child. I don't know, it was just a very wonderful book. I don't know what else to say. I think also there is something to talk about complex women and being like portrayed in fiction, and the way that Yoder tells this story of this woman, this narrator, slowly unbecoming, like undoing herself, which is just a very interesting like position, and I loved it so much. So I love looking at my quotes. Because it just reminds me how much I love this book. But yeah, I tabbed this book. It was gorgeous. I loved it so much. Don't know if I would recommend it, but it was freaking good. The next book is one that I have spoken about before, I think, in my booktube newbie tag, and that is After Sappho by Selby, Wynn, Schwartz. I read this last year for the Booker Prize. This book was on the long list, I'm pretty sure, of the Booker Prize. The fact that it didn't make the shortlist killed me, but I can understand why. I've spoken about this book already. I'm not going to talk about it at any length, other than it's very fascinating the way it's constructed. It's creative nonfiction. It's written in fragments. We follow different women in different parts of the world, all connected because of their activism or their feminism or their sapphism. It's just great, and I actually found it quite hopeful in some parts and quite heartwarming. I just think this is a really important book in like the body of queer literature, so read it. It's really good. I've also annotated this, but most of my annotations in this were just underlines of quotes that I really connected with. Oh, we're already recording. How embarrassing. Do I look different? Yeah, I know. So the math didn't math. I didn't actually talk about like 10 books. So I'm going to insert myself before I talk about the last book of my favorites books of 2022, because I missed out on 2. Yes, I know this is embarrassing, not just for me, but for both of us. I'm embarrassed. Let's move past it. That's why I'm doing a PhD in education and not in mathematics, okay? So, the next book I want to talk about, I should have spoken about first, because it was really a transcendent reading experience. I didn't know what I was expecting when I read this book, and that's, I don't own a physical copy, but it's Glory by Noviolet Bulawayo. This was for the Booker Prize, and I am still so shattered that this didn't win, because this book was exceptional, absolutely exceptional. So if you don't know what this book is about, in a very, very broad way, I'll quickly talk about it. So Glory is a book that takes George Orwell's Animal Farm and reproduces it within like the modern context. It is specifically, I think, an allegory for the Zimbabwean coup that happened in 2017, I think. So the story then centers on Old Horse. So why he's called Old Horse is because he is a horse. All the characters are animals. So the story centers on Old Horse, who has been ruling this fictional city of Jidada with a da and another da, which is how it's referred to in the book. There's such a rhythm to this book. I love it so much. For 40 years. So he's a tyrant, he's a despot, until suddenly he is violently replaced by a new regime. But this new regime, not an improvement, unfortunately. So Bulawayo with humor and a very unique narrative structure, kind of almost feels stream of consciousness. She brings these characters alive, but not only that, she emphasizes the power of discourse and of political rhetoric, and how they can be used within a society to weaponize, how it can be used to weaponize and to control a population. There's also references to Trump, which is understandable because it also worked to highlight that politics and all these sorts of discourses don't actually happen in a vacuum. Like there's a global effect, and so that was really cool to see represented. So you have a book about corruption and disenchantment, but also about love and hope and freedom and activism. I cried so many times. I cried so many times. We're talking like tears, we're talking just getting teary-eyed, but I sobbed like at least I sobbed once, like heaving, gushing from every orifice. And that was on, I think it was page 242. That entire section, sobbing. It was beautiful. I just think it was really stunning, and at the time I was really surprised. Like when I finished, I was really surprised as to how low the ratings were on Goodreads. And I also could not find this book anywhere in store, anywhere near me, and I was getting really frustrated. So I don't own a physical copy, but this is one of the books that I would love to, because it's so gorgeous. I would really love to annotate and just keep forever and try and push people to read it. It was so different and wonderful. I honestly can't wait to read more Noviolet Bulawayo. I'm pretty sure she's written one other book. Love that for us. And then the next book, we're gonna just go straight into it. I do own a physical copy of this book, but where is it? I found it. This book is A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. I think this was just so beautiful and gorgeous and cozy and romantic, and just everything was perfect about this book. The reason why everyone's talking about this book is because it's amazing. It's just so good. If you want a cozy fantasy romance, then just pick this up. You're not gonna regret it. I read this so quickly. It's about Moon. She's one of the very few witches in Britain, and so she's like actually a witch. And she's part of this, very secret society of irregular witches, and she gets an unexpected message. I think it was either emailed or DM'd, because she's on TikTok pretending to do like witchy stuff, but in actuality she's a witch. But she gets this like random message, and she's kind of thinking it's a scam, but when she continues talking online, she is like, you know what's the worst that can happen? I could get murdered, but let's just go and have some fun. And then she goes to this house, and it's called Nowhere House, and unknowingly she has come to a house where they're housing, it's residence to 3 little girls who are all witches. And Micah's like, that can't be right, because every witch has to be part of this like little secret society, because the older generation of witches essentially like hunt them down to make sure that they're okay, because magic can't be known. But then she falls in love with the librarian of Nowhere House named Jamie, and it's the most gorgeous book. It's kind of like enemies to lovers, but not really. Like Jamie is obsessed with her from the start. You have this wonderful cast of characters, and it's the best. Even though I think it's technically a standalone, I would read domestic fluff for like the rest of my life. Like if the author wants to release just like 300 pages of Micah and Jamie's lives that's my dog, at Nowhere House, I would be here for it. It is so gorgeous and heartwarming and wonderful, and if you just want that, I highly recommend you read it. This is just so good. It's so cute. Oh, it's exactly what you want from this. Exactly. And now on to my last book. But I read Gideon the Ninth and fell in love. So I read Haro the Ninth, fell even more in love, and read Nona the Ninth. And now I'm in love and heartbroken because I don't have the next book. These are sci-fi fantasy, and the first book is more of a mystery and kind of a quest where we mainly follow Gideon, who becomes I want to say courtier, but it's not, I don't think it's courtier. I'm going to say bodyguard of Harrow, who Harrow is the heir to ninth house, which in this world there are 9 houses who all have some element of necromancy, which is like magic. So ninth house is specifically bones, and you have other houses that are specifically like for healing or like for medical stuff or for research or for research. They're specific. Harrow, I love Harrow, she's my favorite character. Gideon is hilarious, wonderful. It's not, I've seen this, people kind of talk about it as a romance. I don't think it's a romance, but love is part of it, but different. It's not your typical kind of love story. I loved Gideon. I loved this book so much that I had to immediately read Harrow the Ninth, and this one was so different to the first, and like 300 pages of this book is told in second person, but the reason why you are told 300 pages in, but I think after what happens in Gideon, you know why it's in second person going in. Like it's a very like logical kind of step as to why, and I loved this. I especially loved Harrow's kind of relationship to God. This is just, it was so different from Gideon, but it was everything that I wanted. And so I don't know how to talk about this book because I feel like everything about it is a spoiler for the first. So just know that it is so wonderful and strange. Also, these are quite dense. It can take a while to get used to the world itself and the terminology used, because it's also technically dystopian. And then Nona. My precious Nona. I think I cried. This is the book that I cried. Did I cry? I honestly may have cried with all of them. Again, can't tell you much because everything is a spoiler, but this series is just so unlike any series that I have ever read. If you have read anything similar to this series, please let me know because I need to read it immediately. I am so desperate for the next book in this series, Electo the Ninth, especially with the way that this book ends. But this would have to be my favorite series of 2022. Yeah, because I am up to date with it. It was just, I binge read this so quickly and it was just so brilliant, and I still talk about them. I remember literally ranting about how wonderful this series is at book club and trying to articulate what these books are about without being filling them with spoilers. I love this series and I can't wait to reread them this year when Electo the Ninth comes out, because oh my god, and I think I maybe will annotate them. They're just fantastic. Okay, we're done. That was my 10-ish favorite books of 2022. I hope you enjoyed. What were your like top books of 2022? Would you like to see my worst books of 2022? Let me know because I will most definitely do a video on that. I'm also thinking maybe for my next Friday's video to do a little thing about some like my reading goals and some of the challenges that I'm hoping to accomplish this year in terms of my reading. Let me know if that is something that you're interested in. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm sweating because it's so hot today. But thank you so much for joining me. I will leave all the links to my social medias down below, as well as to any links to blog posts where if I talk more about some of these books. Make sure you say hi to me in the comments because I love that. Thank you so much for all of the love and support of my like previous videos. This has been such a fun creative outlet and talking to you has been really awesome. Yeah, anyway, that's all for now. I will see you next week. Stay safe, take care, it's bad out there kids, and all the love. Bye.